Best way to get unstuck is to simplify the problem as much as possible.
I think the problem is that humans don't know how they feel in isolation. If I took you and put you in a room for a week and said you can have food and water and you can have your thoughts, you'd struggle.
I remember reading about the studies where people would rather take an electric shock than to sit idly on their own. Best way to get unstuck is to simplify the problem as much as possible. That way you can identify what the sticking points are. I call this simplifying of the complex a friction audit. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so over the years, I've met people who need much less time to make sense of complicated situations, knowing what's not important. It's good to know what's important, but I think a lot of us can do that. What's really hard is being able to say, subtract that, subtract that, subtract that. This is the thing. This is the nugget, the kernel. This is what I should be focusing on. And so that's the idea of kind of the importance of subtracting. And there's a great book called Subtract by Leidy Klotz that's on this exact topic. The friction audit itself is a sort of philosophical version of that idea where in business in particular, I do a lot of business consulting that works on this friction audit process. And I spent a long time with companies that ask the question, how do we sweeten the deal? Now, how do we make the product better, more attractive? How do we stand above the crowd? And I started to realize that the return on investment to doing that is often minimal, and it's expensive to do that, and it's really hard to do that in a competitive marketplace where everyone's doing the same thing. But where you get your massive return is not by focusing on making the carrot more attractive. It's by removing the stick that stops people from doing what you'd like them to do. Maybe it's interacting with a customer service rep, maybe it's buying, maybe it's making a particular choice, maybe it's understanding information, whatever it is. If you weed those out, you sand them down, so there's no longer friction there, you see tremendous rises in conversion, often for almost no cost. It's just a matter of asking that particular frame of question and going through that friction audit process. I think the problem is that humans don't know how they feel in isolation as well. If I took you and put you in a room for a week and said you can have food and water and you can have your thoughts, and I took you out after a week and said, so what are you thinking? Like, what's real, what's not real? What do you believe? What are your preferences and values? You'd struggle. There's a lot of really interesting evidence that if you isolate humans, they don't really know what to do with themselves. So those external forces, that there's a kind of permeability between what I'm feeling inside my head and thinking and what these other forces are suggesting to me. So I think it's totally true that we don't pay enough attention to what will be good for us, separate from what other people think we should be doing. But I also don't even think many of us know the answers to those questions, not all the time, but about a lot of things. Like I know deep somewhere, I know that I love to draw, that I'm at peace when I'm drawing and painting. I haven't done that for a really long time. I'm too busy, to your point, of being too focused. But I know that that's something that preference-wise I love doing. But then the question, should I make my career and my life about that? The only way I knew how to answer that was by speaking to lots of people who said it's very difficult to become an artist. Here's the path. It's probably going to be hard to make any money. So keep it as a hobby. But knowing just based on my feelings what to do, I wouldn't have known what to do as a young person. And so I think that's part of the problem, is that it's not just that we're silly for kind of paying attention to others. It's also that I don't even know if we know in isolation without those inputs what the right kinds of paths are.
I remember reading about the studies where people would rather take an electric shock than to sit idly on their own.
Yeah.
And they tested people and they said, would you rather take an electric shock or sit here for a couple of minutes on your own? And people took the...
It's a brilliant study. I mean, the way they set it up is brilliant because they get you to sit in this room, and they do it with men and women, they're mostly college undergrads. And they say to them, you're just going to be sitting here for half an hour. There's a little machine in the corner. It delivers electric shocks. They've tried it already, so they know it hurts. It doesn't feel good. And they're told, you can sit with your thoughts, or, the machine's there if you want to go and use it, which is a bizarre thing to say to people. And they sit there for a while, and time passes, and the vast majority of them go, I think it's 2/3 of them go and start playing with this machine. It's so aversive to just sit with our own thoughts for even half an hour that we need stimulation, even if it's negative stimulation.